back to Politics and the Church. This is Jeremiah Knope, and today I want to consider the issue of childhood education and why this is something that the church needs to seriously consider before casting our vote on Election Day. It doesn't matter whether you have children in the home. This issue is extremely important for every single follower of Jesus. In fact, it would not be an overstatement to say that this issue is one of the most important issues in this election. So here we go. Childhood education. What is childhood education? Well, for starters, it's the process of molding a child's mind so that they see the world a certain way. It's the process of training their thinking to align with a particular worldview, like a mathematical worldview that says 2 plus 2 always and forever equals 4. Or a scientific worldview that says an object in motion stays in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced or outside force. Or a biological worldview that knows the difference between a male and a female, from their physical anatomy to what kinds of chromosomes they have. Do they have 2 X chromosomes? Then they're a female. Do they have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome? Then they're a male. Or a historical worldview that where they learn how this world came into existence and what it means to be a human being, what it means to be an American, how did our country become what it is today. As an educator, you're telling stories. You're interpreting events. You're presenting truth claims. You're giving facts. And in all of this, you are shaping a worldview. So the question is, what stories are being told? What truth claims are being presented? What sources are being used for the facts that are given? And what kind of worldview in all of this is being shaped into your child's mind? Are they being taught to see how every single subject in the universe points to a creator? Or are they being taught that education actually has nothing to do with the creator? I mean, this is what the word universe or university literally mean. They come from 2 Latin words, uni, meaning one, and versus, meaning turn. So one turn or turned into one. In other words, every field of study is turned into one study, and that is ultimately the study of God. Right now, that's super important, but the only point I'm making right now is that education is discipleship. Our children are forming patterns of thinking about everything as they're being educated. And those patterns of thinking become the building blocks for their habits of living. Their education is shaping not only their mind, but also their heart. What they're taught to think about the world inevitably becomes how they feel about the world. So, whoever has the most time with your child's mind also has the greatest access to your child's heart. I think it was Aristotle who said, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." And this is quite literally the point of education. Webster's 1828 dictionary, my favorite, defines education this way. It's the process of enlightening the understanding, correcting the temper, forming habits and manners, and equipping for useful service. Mind, attitude, behavior, habits, service. In other words, education is discipleship. And so the question is not just what are your children being taught when they go to school, but how are they being discipled? Man, this is such an important issue for Christian parents to be aware of in this election, especially if you are in a situation in which sending your child to public school feels like your only option. If there are two presidential parties and those two parties have two very different directions they want to go when it comes to the education of your children, our children, then we need to know what those two different directions are, and we need to know what the Bible has to say about those two different directions. And particularly if one of the presidential parties is aggressively seeking to enable the government's schools to indoctrinate your child with a worldview that goes against the Word of God and to mold their hearts into the image of this secular culture, then you need church to use your God-given voice to vote against it. I want to offer four issues related to childhood education that every Christian parent, grandparent, neighbor, and church member needs to be aware of as they prepare to cast their vote in this election. So I'll deal with the first issue in this video, which will serve as part one, and then we'll look at the other three reasons in the next video. So here we go. Issue number one is parental authority. Parental authority. As parents, it is our God-given responsibility to train our children. Deuteronomy 6, Psalm 78, Ephesians chapter 6. Why is it important for Christian parents to be actively involved in the education of their children? Because, as we've already said, how they're trained today becomes who they are tomorrow. But I think of Proverbs 22:6, which says, you train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. This proverb has implications for all of life, including a civil society. The state of our nation tomorrow depends on the kind of education our children receive today. When it comes to the future of our nation, or any nation for that matter, there's just about nothing more important than the education of our children. And listen, God doesn't give children to governments. He gives them to parents. Nowhere in the Bible are governments commanded to instruct children. This is solely the responsibility of their parents. Now, the parents can solicit help from the community when it comes to educating their children, and this is where different kinds of neighborhood schools can play a role. But regardless of where your child goes to school or who is instructing them, their education is primarily the responsibility of their parents. So now as we prepare to cast our vote next month, we need to acknowledge that our two presidential parties have two very different ideas as to how much authority parents should have when it comes to their child's education. What makes this issue so important right now is that under our current government, the God-given authority to the parents is constantly being compromised or ignored altogether. I mean, recently in a suburb just south of where I live, parents had to get a team of lawyers involved in order to get their children removed from a sex education class that was pushing LGBTQ indoctrination, starting with the children who were just 5 years old. Instead of the school officials simply allowing the parents to pull their own children from a class that went against their religious beliefs, it took multiple attempts from lawyers and the threat of a lawsuit before the school finally acquiesced or consented. But now here's the thing. Sometimes they don't consent. If you've been keeping up with the news, just recently, the Michigan Supreme Court denied a student's mother the opportunity to review a curriculum dubiously titled Ethnic and Gender Studies that was going to be taught to her child. I mean, you just think about this. The government determined that the parent did not have the right to know what they were going to teach her child in the public school. And this abuse of authority goes even deeper than what is being taught in the classroom, as if that wasn't bad enough. But now we also have school personnel intentionally withholding information from parents regarding their child's gender preferences at school. So like if your child gets sucked into this sexual revolution and decides to start going by a different name or using different pronouns, school personnel are instructed to withhold this information from parents, determining that they don't have the right to know, when in fact they have the only right to know. And this is happening right now in my church's community. I mean, this is a present battle for many families in my church. And if that wasn't bad enough, we are already hearing stories of children being taken away from their parents if their parents are unwilling to consent to their child's adolescent desire for gender transformation surgeries. Our children are able to get vaccines without their parents' knowledge, receive psychiatric treatment without their parents' knowledge, get an abortion without their parents' knowledge. The government deems that the parents don't have the right to know. And now, while this might feel new to many of us, it's actually just part of a long-term plan stretching back to, at least the mid-1800s, when teachers' associations began referring to children as, quote, the property of the state. Our government really does believe that our children belong to them. So the bottom line is this. Although neither presidential party is Christian, one party is pushing for even more federal involvement in our childhood education, and one party actually wants to remove the federal government from childhood development altogether, since it really is none of their business. It also, as it relates to this issue of parental authority, there's a difference among party lines regarding the parents' choice of where and how they want their children to be educated. One party wants to give parents options as to where and how they educate their own children, and one party is focused solely on government-funded public education. One party wants to ensure that parents have options when it comes to their child's education, and the other party desperately wants to take away those options. Now, it's always important to say that neither party is going to have any perfect solutions for this or for any other situation in our country. Neither party is concerned about the eternal well-being of our children, nor is that their job. That's our responsibility. As parents, we are ultimately the ones who will be held responsible for our child's education. And one of the ways we can exercise our God-given responsibility is to cast our vote for the presidential party that is most likely to ensure that our parental rights are not being hijacked by the government. That's the first issue related to childhood education, parental authority. So we'll look at the other three issues in the next video. Go vote.